She thought it was just a wounded puppy shivering in the snow, but as the firelight touched its fur and the mountains echoed with distant howls, she began to wonder what kind of creature had she truly brought home. Not all rescues are what they seem, and some hearts are too wild to be tamed. Would you keep something the world says you must let go if it had already chosen to stay? The city of Bozeman lay under a suffocating blanket of snow. Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 restless spirits slamming against windows and rattling the fragile calm of the night. It was the worst snowstorm Montana had seen in over a decade. The Rocky Mountains stood like silent sentinels beyond the city's edge, their jagged peaks obscured by heavy clouds and swirling flurries. In this bitter night, where temperatures plummeted far below freezing, and even the hardiest of creatures sought shelter, Jake Anderson found himself gripping the steering wheel of his old red Ford F-150 with white-knuckled hands. Jake was a man carved from hardship and resilience. At 38, his once boyish face had surrendered to the roughness of time and sorrow. His square jaw was framed by a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, and deep lines creased the corners of his storm-gray eyes, eyes that had witnessed more loss than joy. His 6'2" frame was broad-shouldered, hardened by years as a firefighter, yet his movements carried a quiet gentleness as if every gesture was measured to avoid breaking the delicate things he so rarely encountered in life. Since the tragic death of his wife Emily, a free-spirited climber lost to an icy crevasse during a winter expedition, Jake had buried himself in his work and the solitude of his cabin at the edge of town. The storm was relentless, turning the familiar mountain road into a treacherous path, cloaked in shifting shadows and blinding snow. The rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers was hypnotic against the drumming of the ice-laden wind. Jake muttered under his breath. Almost home, as his tired eyes scanned the road ahead, his mind already drifting to the warmth of his old stone fireplace and the untouched whiskey bottle waiting beside it. But then, as his headlights sliced through the snow-drenched darkness, something moved. A small dark shape huddled on the roadside near the snow-drifted embankment of Highway 191, barely more than a tremble against the endless white. Jake's instincts overrode his exhaustion. His foot found the brake, and the truck skidded slightly before coming to a halt on the icy shoulder. He sat there for a moment, rain and sleet hammering against the roof, wrestling with the weariness in his bones and the voice of reason that told him to just keep driving. But 15 years of pulling lives from burning buildings and frozen lakes taught him better than that. With a resigned sigh, Jake grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a wall, biting through his thick firefighter's jacket and jeans as if he wore nothing at all. The beam of his flashlight swept across the snow, and there it was, a small creature curled into a pitiful ball, barely alive against the cruel wind. Its silver-gray fur was soaked and matted, clinging to a skeletal frame. The creature's head lifted slightly, revealing eyes unlike any Jake had ever seen in a pup, large, luminous, and the color of a cloudless midnight sky. They held a wild, ancient knowing, and yet they shimmered with exhaustion and surrender. Jake crouched low, despite the freezing snow seeping into his boots. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. The creature let out a faint, high-pitched whimper, more a whisper of sound than a true cry. Without hesitation, Jake shrugged off his jacket, wrapping the trembling body against his chest. Its rapid heartbeat fluttered against his palm like a fragile bird trapped in a storm. Back in the warmth of his truck, Jake cranked the heat and glanced down at the bundle in his lap. The creature had already nestled deeper into the folds of his jacket, its tiny body still shivering but visibly calmer. "We'll get you fixed up all right," Jake whispered, as he maneuvered the truck back onto the snowy road, his free hand gently cradling the fragile life he'd just plucked from death's doorstep. At home, the stone cabin groaned under the weight of the storm, but inside it was a haven of flickering warmth. Jake carried the small creature to his bathroom, grabbing his softest towel and carefully drying the sodden fur. Underneath, he found a shockingly thin frame, the ribs sharply visible legs too long and delicate for a typical puppy. But what struck him most were those eyes, too knowing, too aware. He set up a nest near the old cast-iron heater using a pile of thick blankets and laid the creature gently in the center. Despite being dry, it continued to shiver, curling into a tight ball with its bushy tail wrapped protectively around itself. Jake sat heavily on the couch, unable to tear his gaze away. Where had this little one come from? No collar, no tag? Just raw survival etched into its every fragile breath. As the night wore on, sleep teased at the edges of his exhaustion. But just as his head began to droop, a strange sound pulled him back from the brink, a faint, high-pitched chirping, almost like a bird calling in the dead of winter. His eyes snapped open. The little creature had stirred and was making soft, melodic noises from its makeshift bed. Jake sat motionless, the strange music mingling with the soft crackle of the fire and the relentless howling of the storm outside. At that moment, something deep within him shifted. A connection formed, silent but profound, between a broken man and a fragile, wild heart. And that's when he gave her a name. Luna, he said softly, the word falling from his lips like a promise. The creature's ears twitched, and for a brief moment those star-lit eyes locked with his. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, beneath the weathered beams of a lonely mountain cabin, a man and a creature not quite meant for taming found solace in each other's presence. Morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through the frosted windows of Jake Anderson's cabin. The snowstorm had passed, leaving a thick white silence over Bozeman, like nature itself was holding its breath. Jake sat at the small kitchen table, cradling a steaming mug of coffee in both hands. His eyes, still heavy with sleep, kept drifting toward the nest of blankets by the old cast-iron heater, where Luna lay, curled up like a silver shadow. Overnight, she had shifted positions only once, her breathing steady and light. Jake had barely slept, checking on her multiple times, driven by a strange protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. The loss of Emily had hollowed out the part of him that once hoped for connection. Yet now this wild little creature had cracked something open. As the light grew stronger, Luna stirred. She uncurled slowly, stretching each leg with a feline grace that made Jake raise an eyebrow. Her tail flicked gently and she blinked up at him, her deep blue eyes reflecting the morning sun like two glass orbs. Then came the sound again, soft musical chirps rising and falling like song. Definitely not a bark. Jake knelt down and placed a small ceramic bowl of water and a plate of scrambled eggs near her nest. "Let's see if you'll eat today," he said softly. Luna sniffed cautiously. She lapped at the water delicately, but when it came to the eggs, she didn't eat them where they sat. Instead, she took a mouthful and darted under the coffee table, trying to hide the food behind an old stack of firewood. Jake blinked. "Okay, that's new." She repeated the behavior twice more, taking small bits and stashing them behind the couch and under the rug. It wasn't random. It was intentional, methodical. Later that day, Jake bundled up and opened the back door, letting the icy air rush in. He had a small fenced area behind the cabin that Emily once used for her herb garden, long overgrown and buried under snow. He figured Luna could get some fresh air. But the moment he stepped outside with her in his arms, Luna tensed. She didn't shiver from cold, her muscles tightened. Her nose twitched rapidly, ears swiveling like radar dishes. As he placed her gently into the snow-covered yard, she crouched low and crept forward, tail down, steps measured and quiet. It wasn't play. It was tracking. She followed invisible trails in the snow, weaving through the trees beyond the fence, pausing to sniff the air or examine the brush. She was completely focused, moving like a predator, not a puppy. Jake stood at the door, watching awe and confusion churning inside him. She was a mystery, and one that stirred an odd mix of concern and fascination. Later that evening, the air turned glassy cold again. Jake sat on the couch, flipping through a worn book of Montana wildlife, trying to distract himself. Luna had wedged herself beneath the couch, ignoring the plush bed he'd arranged for her. She didn't whimper. She didn't bark. She simply watched him unblinking. A knock came at the door. Surprised Jake stood and opened it to find Derek Malone, a local delivery driver in his early 30s. Derek was a burly man with a thick red beard, a loud laugh, and an odd fondness for wearing baseball caps year-round, even in blizzards. He handed over a brown box labeled Pet Supply Depot. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Didn't order anything." Derek grinned. "Emma Collins did. Said she figured you might need proper food and a warmer bed for your dog." He leaned sideways, peering into the house with a curiosity that bordered on nosy. That the little mutt in there, Jake, turned just enough to block the view. "Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it." Derek shrugged and ambled back to his snow-dusted van. "Word of advice," he called before driving off. "Emma knows her animals. You should probably listen." Jake closed the door with a quiet sigh. Emma Collins. He hadn't met her yet, but her reputation had traveled fast. A new vet in town, early 30s, sharp as a tack, recently relocated from Colorado, where she'd worked with wildlife rehab centers. Folks said she was blunt stubborn and had a soft spot for misfit creatures. Apparently, that now included Luna. Jake brought the box to the living room and opened it a bag of grain-free puppy kibble, a soft faux wool blanket, and a small toy shaped like a squirrel. There was a note attached in neat handwriting for the quiet one with the old eyes. Emma. He glanced under the couch where Luna lay, her gaze locked with his. "Guess someone else thinks you're different too." Over the next few days, Luna grew stronger. Her movements became more precise, her instincts sharper. She barely played with toys and showed no interest in chewing or barking. Instead, she climbed. She learned how to reach the top of the couch by leaping from the ottoman. She scaled a bookcase in the corner with silent elegance, knocking over nothing. Jake had caught her, perched on the windowsill, once her eyes scanning the snowy woods like a sentinel. One evening, just before sunset, Jake brought her outside again. The sky was pink and gold, the snow glittering like powdered glass. Luna moved cautiously, ears erect. Then in the distance came a long, low howl, far off perhaps from the ridge above the tree line. Luna froze. She turned toward the sound, body low, ears tilted forward, tail stiff. Then she howled in response, not a dog's howl, but a short, strange half-chirp, half-yip that made the hairs on Jake's neck rise. She turned back to him, her eyes filled with something wild and ancient. Jake didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply watched her and realized with a clarity that chilled him more than the mountain wind that she wasn't his to claim. She had come to him, yes, but she belonged somewhere far older, far deeper than any home built by human hands. And yet as they returned inside, Luna followed him willingly, brushing against his leg as if to say, "Not yet." That night, as Jake sat by the fire watching her sleep, curled into the crook of the couch, he whispered, "What are you?" She stirred, chirped softly, and laid her head back down. The morning air over Bozeman had a crisp bite to it, the kind that hinted spring was still far away. Frost coated the windows of Jake Anderson's cabin in thin patterns, like pale feathers etched by some unseen hand. Inside, the fire from the stone hearth crackled warmly. But Jake was pacing. Luna watched him from her perch atop the backrest of the couch, a new habit. She balanced effortlessly, her tail curled neatly around her feet, those cobalt blue eyes following every movement. In the last week, her behavior had grown both more confident and more enigmatic. She rarely barked, if ever. Instead, she chirped, yipped, and moved like no dog Jake had ever known. The more she grew, the more his unease grew with her. That morning, Luna had tried to scale the kitchen counter. Not sniffing around for food like a puppy, no, she'd leapt like a predator onto the kitchen island, knocked over a salt shaker, and stared at a shadow near the window as if it had insulted her ancestors. Jake had chuckled nervously at first, but now staring at the defiant silver shape curled beside the fireplace, he sighed. "All right," he muttered, grabbing his keys. Time for answers. The veterinary clinic sat at the edge of town. A clean, modern building tucked between a coffee roastery and a feed store. A wooden sign out front read, Bozeman Wildlife and Pet Health Center. In carved letters flanked by images of a king and a deer, Jake parked the truck and glanced over at Luna curled into the passenger seat, her fur glinting in the sun. She chirped once, low and uncertain. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and pinewood cleaner. The waiting room was empty except for a young woman in scrubs leaning against the reception desk. Anna, the receptionist, was in her early 20s, petite, with freckles dusting her cheeks and a high ponytail that bounced when she spoke. She smiled as they entered. "Hi there, appointment," Jake nodded. "Kind of a walk-in. I've got some questions. About her." He motioned toward Luna. Anna peeked over the counter and blinked. "She's beautiful." "What breed is she?" Jake gave the same answer he'd given himself all week. "That's what I'm hoping to find out. Dr. Collins is finishing up with a fox right now. Shouldn't be long." Jake sat down, Luna resting at his feet, but alert her ears, turning toward every sound. Within moments, the clinic door opened and Dr. Emma Collins stepped into the lobby. She was around 34, tall and lean, with shoulder-length chestnut hair pulled back in a loose braid. Her face was angular, her cheekbones sharp but softened by warm hazel eyes, and a voice like flannel calm, practical and gently firm. She wore a dark green vest over a gray button-up shirt, utility pants and boots streaked with straw and snow salt. "Mr. Anderson," she asked. Glancing at the chart Anna handed her. "That's me. And this must be the mystery girl." Luna didn't move as Emma knelt down, her eyes studying the animal before her. "Those eyes," Emma murmured. "And the legs. Unusual proportions. Let's have a look." Inside the exam room, Luna leapt effortlessly onto the metal table, turning in a full circle before sitting tail swishing once. Emma blinked. "She jumped by herself." Jake nodded, like it was nothing. Emma approached slowly, her hands gentle but firm. She began her examination in silence, running her fingers down Luna's spine, checking joints, inspecting her teeth. "These are sharper than most domestic pups," Emma noted, not sounding surprised. "And these limbs too long. Agile, very flexible shoulder joints." She turned to Jake. "Any barking?" "Not a single one. Just chirps, little yips." Emma leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Where did you find her?" Jake recounted the storm, the roadside rescue, the strange behaviors. Food stashing leaping her fascination with shadows and her eerie reaction to distant howls. Emma listened closely, tapping notes into a tablet. When he finished, she crossed her arms. "I'm going to say something that might sound strange, but I've worked in Colorado with wildlife rehab centers for almost 10 years. That," she gestured toward Luna, "is not a dog." Jake raised his brows. "Then what is she?" "A fox," Emma said flatly. "A red fox, to be specific. Likely a juvenile when you found her young enough that she imprinted on you. That's why she behaves like both domesticated in some ways, but showing wild instincts." Jake rubbed his forehead, letting out a breath. I thought maybe she was a hybrid. Or just weird." "She's something more than weird," Emma replied, her tone softening. "She's not supposed to be here." The room fell into a heavy silence. "I can do a genetic test to confirm," Emma offered, "but if I'm right, Montana law doesn't allow foxes as pets without permits. Even then, the fox has to be non-releasable and proven to be domesticated enough not to be a threat." Jake's jaw tensed. "What happens if someone finds out?" Emma hesitated. "Usually confiscation. And if they think she's too tame to survive in the wild, but not tame enough for adoption, some are euthanized." The word struck Jake like a stone. "I don't report anything unless I have to," she said quietly. "But if she bites someone or gets loose in town, you'll have no choice." Luna shifted slightly, sensing the tension. She chirped once, soft, almost questioning. Emma tilted her head. "She's watching us, listening, and understanding more than I like." Jake sighed. "What do I do?" "Let me run the test. In the meantime, keep her safe. And out of sight." Back at the truck, Jake buckled in Luna, who hopped into the passenger seat without hesitation. He stared out the windshield for a long time before starting the engine. "I thought I rescued you," he whispered. "But maybe you're the one saving me." Luna rested her head against his shoulder, letting out a soft, almost melodic chirp. By the next morning, snowmelt had begun to trickle from the rooftops of Bozeman, dripping rhythmically into the streets as the sun dared peek through a break in the gray sky. Jake Anderson stood at the edge of his backyard, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, watching Luna as she explored the fenced area behind the cabin. The wooden fence had been there since Emily's herb garden days, but Jake had reinforced it last night with wire mesh and extra boards. He hadn't slept much, his mind spinning with the vet's words. "A red fox," he murmured again to himself, as if repeating it could help him believe it. Luna moved with elegant precision, tail flicking lightly as she paused to dig briefly into the snow, then darted forward with sudden grace. Her fur shimmered under the light, no longer soaked and sickly, but rich and wild pale gray, with red undertones catching the gold of morning. Inside the house, the phone rang. Jake walked back in, setting down his mug. He picked up the receiver, an old rotary-style phone Emily had insisted on keeping for its charm. Jake Anderson asked a voice gravelly and measured. "That's me. This is Samuel Turner. I run the Bozeman Wildlife Rescue and Regulation Center." Jake stiffened. Turner was a name people respected and feared in the small community. A former game warden turned head of wildlife management, Sam was known for his strict adherence to law and order when it came to animals. In his late 50s, Turner was tall and rangy, with a perpetually furrowed brow and hawk-like gray eyes that missed nothing. Rumor had it his left hand was half paralyzed from a mountain lion attack. 20 years ago, he never confirmed it, but the thick leather glove he always wore suggested something close. "Dr. Collins gave me your name. Said you might have taken in a stray," Turner said. Jake's fingers tightened around the phone. "She told me she wouldn't report anything. She didn't. She referred you. Big difference. I'd like to come out and take a look myself, non-formal. Just a courtesy visit." Jake hesitated. "She's not dangerous. I'm not assuming she is. I'd just like to assess the situation." They agreed to meet that afternoon. Jake spent the next few hours cleaning the cabin, organizing Luna's bedding, and nervously watching her from every window. Luna, seemingly unaware of the looming visit, curled up in the sunspot on the living room rug, chirping softly in her sleep. At 2 p.m., sharp, a gray government-issue SUV pulled into the driveway. Jake opened the door before Turner could knock. The man standing outside looked like he belonged to the forest more than civilization. Broad shoulders beneath a waxed canvas coat, snow-caked boots, dark denim jeans, and the unmistakable leather glove on his left hand. His face was lined and stern, his eyes evaluating everything like a predator. "Mr. Anderson," he said with a short nod. Jake stepped aside. "She's inside." Turner entered, scanning the space, as if reading a story in the placement of furniture and scent of firewood. His eyes landed on Luna, who stood by the fireplace, ears alert. "That's her?" Jake nodded. Turner approached slowly, crouching at a distance. Luna didn't retreat. She tilted her head, sniffed the air, and chirped once. "That sound," Turner murmured. "Not a dog's voice." "She doesn't bark. She wouldn't. Fox vocalizations are complex. This one's already imprinted." Jake tensed. Is that a problem? Turner stood. It means she sees you as her pack. That's rare. Most wild foxes don't get this far in without snapping or running. He paused. You've got something unique here, but it's also a liability. Jake's voice tightened. She's not a threat. Turner studied him. Maybe not, but people will assume she is. All it takes is one neighbor complaint, one curious child getting too close. The law isn't built for gray areas like this. So what are you saying? Turner's tone softened slightly. I'm saying get ahead of it. Apply for special containment. It's not easy, but possible. The permit office will want proof she's non-releasable and not dangerous. Behavioral records. Photos. Vet reports. Jake nodded slowly. I'll get it. Turner turned toward the door. Then you better start soon. Bozeman's not a city that keeps secrets well. As the SUV disappeared down the road, Jake exhaled shakily. Luna padded over, nudging his leg with her nose. That evening, Jake pulled an old shoebox from the top of his closet. Inside were photos Emily's old Nikon shots from their mountain hikes. One caught his eye, Emily smiling beneath a pine tree, a fox in the distance, just barely visible behind her shoulder. She'd called them the Watchers of the Forest. Jake smiled faintly, then opened his laptop and started typing Special Wildlife Permit Montana requirements. The next day, as the town thawed under a rare stretch of sunlight, Jake paid a visit to the clinic again. Emma greeted him in the back room sleeves rolled up elbow-deep in a crate of bandages. Her expression softened as he entered. I need your help, he said without hesitation. She wiped her hands. With everything. The reports, the behavior logs. If I'm going to keep her, I need to prove she's safe. Emma nodded. All right, then we do it right. As they drafted the first documents, Luna sat beneath the examination table head on paws, watching them with glowing eyes that held a stillness deeper than instinct, almost like trust. By late February, Bozeman's winter held fast. Though the days were slowly stretching their reach, the nights remained long and bitter. A fresh layer of snow softened the jagged corners of fences, roads, and rooftops. But inside Jake Anderson's cabin, something was changing. The quiet was no longer heavy with grief. It was watchful, charged with a tension that pulsed beneath every breath. Jake sat at the dining table, papers spread across the wood like the scattered thoughts in his head. Permit applications, wildlife behavior forms, statements of domestication, all required by the state for anyone hoping to legally keep a fox. The process was grueling, bureaucratic, and full of language that favored preservation over compassion. Across the room, Luna lay sprawled beneath the front window, her sleek form silhouetted against the frost-streaked glass. She had grown. No longer the trembling bundle of fur he'd rescued, she now moved with a power and elegance that defied the boundaries of domesticity. Her silver coat glinted with red tones in the firelight, and her long bushy tail flicked occasionally in rhythm with her dreams. Jake exhaled deeply, pen tapping the table. A soft knock interrupted the hush. He opened the door to find Eddie Matthews, his oldest friend and fellow firefighter, standing with a six-pack in one hand and a skeptical grin tugging at his wind-chapped face. Eddie, in his early 40s, was broad-shouldered and easygoing, with sandy blonde hair always flattened beneath a beanie and laugh lines etched deeply into his tan skin. Known for bad jokes and unwavering loyalty, Eddie had been there when Jake lost Emily and never left his side since. You look like a man about to lose a custody battle, Eddie said, stepping inside without waiting. Jake closed the door. You have no idea. Eddie's gaze landed on Luna. His grin faltered. That's her man. She looks wild. She is wild, Jake replied. But she's also not. It's complicated. They sat near the fire, beers opened the quiet between them, stretching comfortably. Jake explained everything: the vet visit, the permit process, Sam Turner's warning. Eddie listened, nodding occasionally, eyes never leaving Luna. So you're trying to keep her legally, he finally said. You think they'll buy it? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I'm trying. She's not a pet. But she's also not just a fox anymore. She's somewhere in between. Eddie chuckled. Kinda like you, huh? Jake raised an eyebrow. You're not the guy you were. Not before Emily, not after. You're something new now, and maybe she's part of that. Jake looked down, humbled by the truth in his friend's words. The next morning, Jake and Emma met at the clinic. She brought out a folder of documents, signed vet statements, photos of Luna's behavior, even a growth chart. Turner's office will want behavior logs, so I've been keeping notes on what you told me. You'll need to supplement with videos. Emma said, her tone brisk but encouraging. They worked side by side in the small office for hours. Emma, now more relaxed in Jake's presence, occasionally made dry cutting observations, usually when paperwork contradicted common sense. She was methodical, detail-oriented, and entirely unafraid of bureaucracy. A former wildlife rehabilitator, Emma had once been part of a team that reintroduced orphaned lynxes into the Colorado wild. But after a traumatic incident involving a lynx that was euthanized for biting a handler, she'd relocated to Montana to work in private veterinary practice. Since then, her approach to wildlife straddled compassion and pragmatism. You know what your biggest obstacle's gonna be? She asked without looking up. Turner people. One sighting, someone snaps a photo of her, posts it online. Your permit means nothing until it's approved. If the public thinks she's a danger, you lose her. That afternoon, Jake returned home determined to begin video documentation. He placed his old DSLR on a tripod and hit record as Luna explored the backyard. She darted through snowbanks, chased a squirrel's scent, and later curled beside Jake's boot under the porch bench. He recorded it, all her obedience when called, her refusal to engage with other animals, and her nightly chirps when he read aloud beside the fire. But even as he gathered evidence, the pressure grew. 3 days later, as Jake shoveled the driveway, Mrs. Crane, his elderly neighbor, called from across the snowy fence. "Jake," she shouted, "I saw something strange in your window last night." Jake looked up, startled. "Oh, a fox, bigtail. Pretty thing. I thought maybe it was a dream, but now I'm not so sure." He forced a smile. "Just an odd-looking rescue dog." She laughed. "Well, it gave me a start. Keep him close, will you?" He nodded quickly, heart pounding. That night he reinforced the curtain rods and limited Luna's outdoor time. She didn't complain, but she paced more, chirped louder, stared at the door with restless energy that gnawed at Jake's guilt. The next evening, Turner called. "Word's getting around," he said. "I've had 2 informal reports about a fox in the neighborhood. Nothing official. But you're running out of time." "I'm working on the permit," Jake replied. "I have records, vet statements, everything." "You need one more thing," Turner added. "Proof that she's non-releasable. Not just tame, but too domesticated to survive on her own." After the call ended, Jake sat on the couch staring at Luna as she chased a beam of light across the hardwood. He thought of Emily, how she had once whispered to him under the pines. Some things aren't meant to be tamed, but sometimes they choose to stay. And that's what Luna had done. She had chosen him. The wind shifted that night. It wasn't the usual mountain breeze that filtered through the trees behind Jake Anderson's cabin. It was sharper, wilder, carrying a low murmur of something ancient. Jake stood on the back porch, Luna at his side, both of them staring into the forest beyond the fence. The moon hung full and pale, casting long shadows over the snow-blanketed ground. It had been a week since the incident with Mrs. Crane. Since then, Jake had kept Luna hidden from sight, limiting her outdoor time and drawing the curtains before sunset. But tonight she had grown restless. She chirped insistently at the door until he finally gave in and let her outside. She didn't run or dig. Instead, she stood still, staring at the distant tree line with ears forward and body taut. Jake reached down gently, touching the back of her neck. "What is it?" And then came the sound. A long, low howl rolled down from the mountains, deep echoing, unmistakably wild. It wasn't a dog's bark or the shriek of coyotes. It was a true wolf's call, and it sent a shiver up Jake's spine. Luna tilted her head and let out a sound in return, a strange layered mix of yip and warble that reverberated with haunting beauty. Jake's breath caught. She wasn't just responding, she was calling back. At dawn, the howl still echoed in his thoughts. At the fire station, he sat beside his locker, sipping bitter coffee as the station's Dalmatian Sparky trotted past, tail wagging. "Didn't sleep?" asked Captain Martinez, a seasoned firefighter in his early 50s, with dark, weathered skin and a commanding presence. He had a military edge to him, straight posture-clipped speech, but treated his crew like family. He stood beside Jake, arms crossed. Jake shook his head. "Been busy. Stuff at home." Martinez raised an eyebrow. That fox dog thing of yours still hanging around Jake stiffened slightly. "Yeah. She's part of the family now. Just be careful," Martinez said quietly. "This town's full of good people, but they scare easy. You lose control of that animal even once they'll take her from you." That afternoon, Jake returned home to find a small envelope in the mailbox. It was from Dr. Evelyn Marks, a state wildlife official whose name he'd come across during his permit research. She had a reputation as being firm but fair. In her early 60s, Evelyn was tall and composed with short silver hair and a gaze that could silence a room. He'd sent her a copy of Luna's behavior logs photos and Emma's veterinary assessment. Inside the envelope was a letter. "Mr. Anderson, your documentation has been received and is under review. However, due to Luna's unique profile, I request an in-person assessment at your residence within the week. Please be advised that approval hinges on full containment, behavioral predictability, and non-releasability confirmation. Sincerely, Dr. Evelyn Marks, State Wildlife Division." Jake folded the letter slowly. His hands were shaking. Later that evening, he sat with Emma at the clinic, updating her on the letter. She wore a tired expression, her braid fraying around the edges, her scrub smudged with iodine and animal dander. "She's coming here?" Emma asked. Jake nodded. "That's, good and bad." "How so?" "Evelyn's one of the few who might actually approve something like this. But she'll test you. And Luna. She doesn't care about sentiment, just facts." Emma stood and walked to a shelf, pulling out a thick binder labeled Wildlife Rehab, Non-Release Protocol. She flipped it open. "We'll need to prepare," she said. "You'll need to demonstrate full control. No slipping through fences, no chasing birds, no sudden chirping fits." Jake laughed under his breath. "So, be a dog." Emma gave him a look, or at least fake it for 10 minutes. That night, Jake began training. He started with simple commands. "Sit, stay. Come." Luna didn't obey at first. She tilted her head, puzzled, darted behind chairs, and climbed onto the coffee table instead. But Jake didn't give up. He used rewards, turkey scraps, gentle praise, even a chirp of his own. By the third night, Luna came when called. Not always, but enough to give Jake hope. 3 days later, Evelyn Marks arrived. She stepped from a white government jeep in a wool coat that brushed her boots clipboard in hand. Her face was unreadable as she scanned the property, the reinforced fencing, the snow-shoveled yard, the sealed garbage bins. Jake stood at the porch, Luna beside him on a leash. "Mr. Anderson," she greeted. "This is Luna." Jake nodded. "She's more than she looks." Evelyn's eyes flicked to Luna. "Let's see." Over the next hour, Evelyn toured the enclosure, reviewed the food log, checked the veterinary records, and observed Luna's behavior. When Jake demonstrated the basic commands, Luna surprised them both. She sat, stayed, walked beside him without pulling. She even ignored a squirrel that darted across the yard. Evelyn said little, only jotting down notes, her expression unreadable. At last she turned to Jake. "Do you believe this animal can be released into the wild?" Jake swallowed. "No, she wouldn't survive." "Why, she doesn't fear humans. She doesn't know how to hunt or avoid roads. She chirps at fire alarms and steals socks. She trusts too easily." Evelyn finally met his eyes. "And do you understand what this commitment means?" Jake nodded. "I didn't choose her. She chose me, and now I choose her back." A long pause. Then Evelyn made one last note on her clipboard. "I'll be in touch." That night, Jake sat beside the fire. Luna lay at his feet, head resting on his boot. He didn't know what Evelyn would decide. But in this moment, under the soft hum of burning logs and snow brushing the windows, He knew he had done everything he could, and that for now had to be enough. A week passed with no word from the state wildlife office. Each day stretched longer than the last, strung tight with silent dread. The late winter sun began to rise earlier over Bozeman, casting thin golden light across the snow-dusted trees. But inside Jake Anderson's cabin, the atmosphere remained clouded by uncertainty. Jake sat at his kitchen table, the morning light, catching the hollows beneath his eyes. A stack of untouched firewood lay in the corner. The wood stove crackled, but even its warmth couldn't settle the anxious thrum in his chest. Luna lay on the backrest of the couch, as she often did now, her eyes half-lidded. Her silver-gray tail curled neatly beside her. She had grown more alert, more sensitive. Any sound, a branch breaking in the woods, a plane overhead, made her ears twitch and her body stiffen like a taut string. Jake hadn't realized how much of his life now revolved around her. Her meals were measured and tracked. Her playtime was recorded. Her moods were monitored like the phases of the moon. And yet, despite the burden, he wouldn't have it any other way. The quiet was broken by the soft buzz of his phone. A single message appeared on the screen. From Dr. Evelyn Marks. Permit pending final decision. Recommend minimizing exposure. Reports have increased. Jake's blood ran cold. Reports, plural. He stepped outside for air, Luna following silently. The snow had begun to melt in patches, revealing muddy earth and brittle grass. Across the yard, a familiar figure waved a man in a red jacket, walking a golden retriever. It was Michael Kane, a new neighbor who'd moved in 2 weeks ago. Mid-30s tall, with a salt-and-pepper beard that made him look older than he likely was. A software consultant who worked remotely, Michael had an easy smile, and a Labrador named Jasper friendly, and a little too curious for his own good. Morning, Michael called. Heard some weird sounds the other night. Thought it was coyotes. Jake forced a grin. Could have been. Michael nodded, squinting toward the tree line. Your dog okay with visitors? Jasper's been dying to meet her. Not today, Jake replied, trying to sound casual. She's a little unpredictable. Michael raised an eyebrow. All right, just be careful. My wife's already Googling what kind of dog has ears like that. Back inside, Jake closed the door with more force than he meant to. Luna chirped once and brushed against his leg. He knelt beside her, resting his hand on her shoulder. We're running out of time. That afternoon, he returned to the vet clinic to speak with Emma. She was in the recovery room monitoring a sedated fox with a bandaged leg, an actual fox this time rescued from a trap in Gallatin Canyon. The contrast between Luna was jarring. This fox flinched at human presence, its eyes wild with distrust, its breathing fast and shallow. Emma glanced up. Jake. He stepped inside. We've got trouble. Neighbors are asking questions. Evelyn says reports are increasing. Emma frowned. How many? She didn't say. Just that it's getting harder to justify keeping Luna under the radar. Emma rubbed her eyes, fatigue pulling at her face. It was always a risk. She's not just unusual, she's unforgettable. People remember what they can't explain. Jake leaned on the counter. Then I need to give them something they can explain. Emma raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like purpose. If she's seen as useful as helpful, not dangerous, maybe that changes the story. Emma blinked. What are you thinking? Search and rescue. She stared at him for a long beat, then laughed softly. Not out of ridicule, but disbelief. Jake. She's not a bloodhound. No, he said, she's better. Over the next few days, Jake tested the idea. In the woods behind the cabin, he began training exercises. He'd hide items with strong scents, gloves, jackets, and led Luna to find them. She was a natural. Her nose darted through the air, her movements laser-focused, and each time she located an item, she chirped and waited by it. Until Jake arrived. One evening, he invited Eddie out for a trial. They met at the edge of the woods near dusk, wind rustling the pine needles above. You sure about this? Eddie asked, eyeing Luna. Jake nodded. You walk in 200 feet, drop the scarf, and circle back. Let's see what she does. Eddie shrugged, pocketed the scarf, and vanished into the trees. 10 minutes later, Jake brought Luna to the starting point. She sniffed the air, then bolted forward nose low to the ground. Jake jogged behind her, heart racing. She found the scarf in under 2 minutes. Eddie whistled low. That's impressive. She's a tracker, Jake said. Better than half the dogs I've worked with. That night, as Jake sat watching footage from the training on his laptop, Luna curled up against his thigh. The soft hum of the fire was the only sound, until Luna raised her head sharply. Jake followed her gaze. At the window, a shadow moved. He sprang to his feet, grabbing the flashlight. Outside, he scanned the yard. Nothing. Then near the edge of the woods, movement. 2 foxes, wild and lean, stood barely inside the tree line. Their eyes gleamed, reflecting the moonlight. They didn't run. They watched. Luna stepped forward to the glass tail, stiff body poised. A low chirp escaped her throat. Jake stood behind her, breath held. The wild foxes lingered a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the dark. Luna didn't move for a long time. She stared into the forest, as if caught between worlds, one foot in the firelight, the other in the shadows. Jake laid a hand on her back. You can leave, he whispered. Anytime, but you stay. She chirped again and returned to her place by the fire. He understood now. She wasn't here because she had to be. She stayed because she chose to. Spring came to Bozeman like a sigh of relief. The snow receded slowly from the base of the mountains, revealing patches of emerald moss and damp earth beneath. The rivers, once frozen and silent, began to babble again with meltwater from the Rockies. Jake Anderson stood in the center of his yard, hammer in hand, sweat beading beneath the brim of his cap, despite the cool breeze. Behind him stood a structure months in the making, a custom-built enclosure sprawling half the backyard. It wasn't a cage. It was a compromise. The fence rose 10 feet high, reinforced with dig-proof mesh, with a double-entry gate, and soft ground littered with tree branches climbing platforms, tunnels, and a shaded den. Jake had followed every requirement from the state wildlife department, not because he wanted Luna locked away, but because he knew if the law couldn't be bent, then he'd shape the world around her instead. Inside, Luna explored the space with practiced grace. She had taken to the enclosure faster than he'd expected, moving between levels with ease, darting through tunnels, and leaping from logs with the elegance of her wild cousins. But every evening as dusk approached, she would return to the gate and wait. Tail gently swaying, ears tilted, eyes locked on the porch, until Jake opened the door. That was the part he never included in the permit documentation. She always came home. Jake closed the toolbox and turned to find Dr. Evelyn Marks approaching from her car, clipboard in hand. Today she wore a forest green field jacket, her expression composed, but lacking its usual sternness. She paused at the edge of the enclosure, watching Luna perch atop a platform, the wind tousling the silver fur around her face. She's grown, Evelyn said. Jake nodded. In more ways than I expected. I read the final evaluations. Dr. Collins sent a full video log. The behavioral consistency, the response to training. It's all there. Jake waited, heart thudding. Evelyn glanced down at her clipboard, then handed over a crisp white envelope. The board approved your special permit. It's conditional, renewable annually, and includes inspections. But it's yours. Jake took the envelope with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the paper inside bold black letters across the top. Approved for non-releasable wildlife containment. Species red fox. Thank you, he breathed. She's lucky, Evelyn said, her voice softer than before. Most don't get this outcome. Most don't get someone willing to change their whole life to keep them safe. Jake looked toward Luna now, trotting to the gate, as if sensing the emotional weight in the air. I'm the lucky one, he said. That evening, the firehouse was alive with chatter. The crew gathered in the rec room after their shift, eating pizza and passing around beer. At the center of attention was Luna, her head poking out of a special vest Jake had modified, marked with the patch Search Companion. Observation only. Though she wasn't a certified K9, she had been allowed to accompany Jake to training exercises under the new permit's educational clause. Sparky the station's old Dalmatian had warmed up to her in time. The two now shared a wary truce, each tolerating the other's presence in a mutual agreement, forged from stolen snacks and nap-time proximity. "Still weirdest dog I've ever seen," Eddie said, shaking his head, as Luna chirped softly and laid down beside Jake's boot. "She's not a dog," Jake replied, smiling faintly. "She's Luna." 2 weeks later, they were called in for a wilderness search near Bridger Canyon. A teenage hiker had gone missing during a solo trek. The terrain was rugged, steep trails, dense undergrowth, and freezing night temperatures. Jake stood at the staging point with Luna at his side, the fire captain glancing uncertainly at the fox. "You sure about this?" Captain Martinez asked. "She won't replace the dogs," Jake said, "but she might find something they can't." Luna moved with purpose. Her nose hovered inches above the ground, and unlike the dogs who fanned out, she darted with precision, zigzagging, like she knew the forest better than any map. 40 minutes in, she stopped at the base of a rocky incline, tail rigid. She chirped once. Jake scrambled up and found the boy wedged in a hollow ankle, sprained but conscious. The rescue team arrived minutes later, stunned by how quickly Luna had tracked him down. Back in town, the story made headlines. "Unusual Fox AIDS Rescue in Montana Search." Evelyn called the next day. "This doesn't change the law," she said, "but it changes how people see her." In the months that followed, Luna became something of a local legend. Kids asked about her at the feed store. Tourists tried to snap photos, and always Jake kept her close, never exploiting, only protecting. One autumn afternoon, Jake sat on the back porch with a mug of cider watching as Luna explored the enclosure. Leaves had begun to fall, golden and red, blanketing the grass. Beyond the fence, the woods rustled gently. Then came the sound again, the low rising call of wild foxes from deep within the trees. Luna froze. She stood tall, nose-tilted, ears twitching. Jake set his mug down. His heart clenched. She looked at him, and then slowly she turned back to the fence and trotted toward the gate. Jake opened it without a word. She climbed the porch steps, pressed her head gently against his knee, and curled beside him. "You heard them?" he whispered. She chirped once. "You still want to stay?" Another chirp, softer this time. Then silence. Night fell gently over Bozeman. The stars came out one by one, scattered like promises. And under them, Jake and Luna sat together. Man and fox tethered not by leashes or fences, but by the quiet understanding that some bonds are made not of ownership, but of choice. They had crossed the distance between two worlds and built a life where both could belong. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with sirens or signs. Sometimes they come in the soft patter of paws across a wooden floor, in the steady gaze of a wild soul who chooses to stay. Luna wasn't just a fox mistaken for a dog. She was a bridge between two worlds, carrying with her a quiet kind of healing that no one expected. Through her, a grieving man found reason to hope again. A community discovered empathy beyond appearances, and laws, once written in stone, made space for grace. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe it was a whisper from above reminding us that love doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes it has fur and bright eyes, and a wild heart that still learns to trust. If Luna's journey stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs a reason to believe again. Leave a comment and tell us, have you ever been changed by a bond you didn't see coming? And if you believe God still sends small miracles in silent forms, type Amen below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of redemption, courage, and the creatures who teach us how to love. May God bless you and all the wild hearts He sends to walk beside us.